Hello and welcome everyone to the Asian Voices Radio Podcast, where you will find real Asian American conversations about all those topics you were a little too afraid to talk about with your Asian parents. I'm your host, Sasha Fu, and today we'll be discussing Asian Americans in the entertainment industry. And today we have a special guest, actor Archie Kao. Now, if you're familiar with Power Rangers or CSI, you probably know our guest, Archie Kao. He was a series regular on CSI in the role of Archie Johnson. He also played Detective Sheldon Jin on Chicago PD. And early in his career, Archie Kao scored the role of the Blue Power Ranger in the Power Ranger series Lost Galaxy series. Now, Archie's latest project is the movie Christmas at the Ranch. He's playing a cowboy in this film. This movie is an LGBT holiday-themed rom-com, and it's streaming right now on the network Tello. Welcome, Archie, or should I say howdy, partner?
Good morning, Sasha.
Since you're playing a cowboy.
Yeah.
I know you're based in Los Angeles, but you grew up in the D.C., Washington, D.C. area. And just like me, you are a first-generation American-born person. Can you tell me a little bit about your family and where they immigrated from?
My mom was born in mainland China and then grew up in Taiwan. And then my biological father and her actually met in the U.S. And so I didn't grow up. They split when I was really young, not even a year old yet. So I grew up. I truth be told, I was actually taken in by a family when I was still very young, and I wouldn't say newborn, but pretty much a toddler. My mom was so poor actually that she had to actually have like a foster family take care of me for a little bit until she could get on her feet. So this family was terrific, salt of the earth. They lived on a working farm in northwestern Pennsylvania. So I grew up milking cows and feeding the chickens and cleaning pig pens and stuff like that for the first 5 years of my life.
So the ranch life is not unknown to you. You know all that stuff.
Yeah, brought back some memories. Yeah.
So spending those 4 years with this Caucasian family in Western Pennsylvania, how did that affect your sense of identity as the son of two Asian people?
That's it's really funny. I didn't, of course, when you're a little kid, you don't realize how well this is going. I grew up, I remember literally doing hay rides and, carnivals and like tobogganing through the woods in the winter. And I didn't know they had 5 kids of their own as well. And so I didn't even know I was Asian until I started to grow up and went back to Virginia to be with my mom and now stepfather. And then, the kids will tell you that you're different. But growing up on this farm, we were like insulated, and nobody ever told me that I was Chinese. So it was really odd because I didn't feel different at all. I grew up thinking I was totally white.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, very interesting. I feel very grateful that they were such a wonderful family. They treated me just like one of their own. But because of that, I didn't have any bearing at all on being Asian until well into adulthood, so, yeah.
That's interesting because although you might have identified with this white culture, you speak, I understand, Mandarin, which is an amazing gift, an amazing ability.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I started because in my let's see, this was I started being curious about it actually when I was still on CSI. And during that time, when you're working on a network show, it's like you're in school. You have summer holidays and you have the winter break, and it's kind of like that, the same sort of schedule almost, like 3 months off in the summer and nearly a month off in the winter. During that time, I would go to I started doing commercials in Asia, not just I started like doing them in Taiwan, Malaysia, Indonesia. They sent me all throughout, except for one day. One of the later ones was in Shanghai, And when I was sent to Shanghai, I was like, wow, it blew my mind. And then I had a bunch of friends that had already been over there, and they were helping me kind of navigate the landscape. And it was like strange how it's really strange as having an epiphany in your adulthood that you're actually Chinese. And I had no connection to, I couldn't speak a word of it, not a word of it. And so, I felt kind of embarrassed about it actually. Like, why am I not? And so during my hiatuses from CSI, I thought I need to start coming over here and studying language. And I didn't go over there to try to build a career. I actually went over there to try to learn my heritage.
Wow.
Because obviously by then I realized I was Asian, but I just didn't have any sort of emotional connection to it. And one of the best ways to connect to a culture is through the language and through the food.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But that's quite a feat because to learn Mandarin as an adult, I mean, Mandarin is a difficult language because of all the
Yeah.
characters and the different tones. And to do that as an adult is especially
Hmm.
impressive. So kudos to you, Archie.
Thank you.
Oh, I was going to backtrack because you were talking about how you were at CSI and you had this opportunity to pick up
Hmm.
the language. But I want to know a little bit about how you decided as a kid growing up in Washington, D.C., to become an actor and, uh, try to become immersed in this Hollywood culture.
The truth of the matter is I didn't. Um, I had curiosities about it when I was a little boy, but there was no support from, I mean, that was like telling my parents I wanted to try to explore the entertainment business might have well been telling them like I wanted to, you launch into outer space or something. I don't know. It was just such a foreign concept. So it got put that never really got explored, or it never, that seed never germinated. Um, but I think really what happened was after college, um, I really wanted to just kind of find ways to like challenge myself and kind of scare myself into doing something I hadn't done before. And acting is just about as scary a thing as I could think to do
Agreed.
because it's not like I grew up with any background in it, and it seems like a pretty audacious thing to say, I think that you should watch me talk and walk. That's kind of what we do as actors. Like, I kind of think that would be a good idea for you to watch me walk and talk. It seems really like but because of the inherent, like, I guess, I don't know. I think maybe I was challenged with, not finding my own identity when I was younger. I didn't feel like I had this built-in sense of, esteem, for myself. So I would say one of the things about growing up in Virginia, I really learned to adapt really well in the mainstream culture, but I didn't really learn much about who I was.
Mm.
But I think slowly, I didn't realize at the time, but me taking on these challenges and then being able to recognize that I had built progress, gave me some sense of, fortitude and self-reliance that
Would it be somewhat of a stretch to say you grew into your identity as an Asian man?
I think I still am. Because the first thing that really catalyzed this was when I was in college. I was, involved in student government, and I was, I ran for student government vice president one year, and I was just so terrified the whole time. Because again, that's putting yourself out there, and like everyone's like,
Mm.
watch me publicly fail, which is kind of what I was doing. I was putting myself within this very public milieu, and like you're on a college campus, like, thousands of other, um, and I don't know. I think I just wanted to feel like I was challenging myself to grow. And I was always thinking then that, if you don't try to spread your wings, you don't even know if you have them, So at one point when I went to college, I remember I tried to, this is ridiculous to say now, but I remember trying to introduce myself to 10 people a day. I don't,
Huh.
just as like a way to kind of push myself out of my comfort zone. And I literally
Wow.
would walk into circles of people and introduce myself, which is, I think I had like I said, must have had esteem issues when I was younger. So I was doing that, and after like the first year of college, I knew all these people, And then I
Hmm.
realized, wow, I know a lot of people here. And and it kind of became more of a natural fit to say I'm gonna, run, because I was kind of a public person by then, and in the university campus. And so, but saying that I wanted to run as an elected official amongst my colleagues was kind of a kind of again an audacious thing to think, I think. So but I did, and I was running really scared.
Well, how did you transition or pivot to acting? I understand from a conversation we had earlier that there were certain members of your family who were kind of, they had their doubts about whether you would make it in Hollywood, especially this is 20 years ago when there wasn't a lot of talk about inclusivity or diversity in casting.
Yeah, well, the reason I'm talking about the student government thing is because I think it was the bridge to me to
Ah,
going into acting and saying I did it before. I did something, uh, as well as I thought it was courageous then. And by that point, when I had gone to LA, I really went to LA not to act. I actually went to LA to get away from Virginia. I hadn't, I didn't even know Hollywood was in LA, actually. I was just so, I really was
what?
not, I had a college degree, but let me tell you, it was really funny. I remember I told a friend that I'm going to move to LA after, just because I wanted to start anew. It was just about as far away from where I grew up as I could get. I just wanted to try something new. Was starting to feel like boxed in by this traditional, like sort of predetermined life. And because right after college, for 4 months, I worked on Capitol Hill. And I remember doing the whole subway, like, subway rat tunnel thing. I felt like just like everybody else from 9 to 5, I would, clock in, clock out. And I was like, this can't be my life. I did it for 4 months, I think. And I was like, I can't do this. I'm going to look up one day and regret where did my youth go? Just spent in these subway tunnels, riding back and forth between Northern Virginia and the Capitol. Not to disrespect anybody that chooses to do that, of course. If they like to do that, I totally salute that. But I knew that
Yeah.
clearly that wasn't what I wanted to do. It didn't feel like that was a fit for my natural appetite. Um, so I just went to LA without any plan at all. Like I said, I didn't even know Hollywood was there. But it's funny because I did tell a friend that I was going to LA, and he goes, "Right, Archie, you're going to go out there and become an actor." And I go, "What?" Because I literally sincerely did not know that Hollywood was in LA, you know?
So seriously, the idea of becoming an actor did not even cross your mind as you were moving cross country.
No, no, not until I got to LA. And then it was actually suggested to me because I remember the reason I moved to LA is because I had an aunt and uncle that I could crash. And they had my cousin, 6-year-old kid who had bunk beds, so I could crash on his top bunk. That's what I did. That's why I moved to LA because it was a cost consideration. um, but he was a very he's a very I think he's always wanted to. To be honest with you, I think he's always wanted to be an actor. But he did do the kind of the responsible thing and get a traditional job. But he got one in sales, and I could always see with his personality that he was always very kind of spirited in that.
This is
And
the
so
uncle.
we were my uncle, yeah, and we were mapping
Yeah.
out, well, what jobs, where can I send my resume? Because here I am, a fresh college graduate with no plan. Am I going to go to graduate school? Am I going to work in pharmaceuticals like he did? Am I gonna, whatever? And then he said all these things, and he said, or you could move down to West LA, get a job waiting tables, and be an actor. And I started laughing, and then I was like, well, wait a second. And then I thought about it, and the reason why I chose to pursue it is again going back to what I said about scaring myself into personal growth. It wasn't that I had some inherent drive and desire to be an actor or thought that I had some, inherent ability to be a performer. It wasn't like that at all. I didn't grow up doing theater. I didn't, grow up with a family that was already in the arts, anything like that. I literally thought this is a terrifying thing to do. And let's do that. So let's see about it. And at that point, when I'd moved to LA, I think I'd already fired my mouth off enough to everybody back home that I was going to try being an actor. Then now I had to try because I already had done, enough talking about it.
I was going to take a deeper dive into that. What kinds of roles would you be put up for? Because I know 20 years ago, I mean, a lot of people of color, for instance, they might be sent out to play a gang member or a drug dealer, or, you know, the trope about Asians. Oh, he's the brainy science researcher or the kung fu master. There were these stereotypical roles. What kinds of roles would you be called for, or what kinds of roles would you audition for?
Well, I think in those early days, like they would, I remember, I mean, I remember getting auditions for like Cambodian boat refugees and stuff like that. Like obviously I'd never been to Cambodia. I didn't, I was just as American as could be. I couldn't understand any of that. But I remember them just kind of lumping anybody that looked like they were Asian. They would just kind of lump us all together, no matter what it seemed like. Nowadays, thankfully, those types of things, the material, the source material, I think that I'm seeing is more nuanced, and it's more. Even when I was doing CSI and even Chicago PD, which I basically kind of was, I'm thankful for the jobs, but I mean, if you've ever watched the shows, I'm basically playing the same character in both shows, and it was that character really is meant to be, and it's a procedural drama, so I have to, obviously recognize that that was the function of that character in the show, but it's very transactional, right? They weren't writing the really nuanced characters that they write are your leads, the romantic leads of pretty much any project, right? Because that's what drives the engine of the story. So much of what I was getting when I look back was the friend, or something, so you're serving a function to the thing, but you're not driving the narrative. And so that was always my big hunger to be able to do that. But the economics of the market weren't in such a way that they afforded us the opportunity to have content creators come in and do those sorts of things.
Is that changing now?
Oh, I see it changing by leaps and bounds. Yeah. I never thought I would see it in my career. I remember when I left Chicago PD at the end, my character gets killed at the end of the first season. And at that point I had already done 3 movies in China, even though I really didn't speak Mandarin. But they were still, giving me, and I am playing the lead, the romantic leads and stuff. I thought, well, I guess China likes me. I'm gonna go over and see what's happening over here. And I remember I had this exit lunch with, NBC Universal, and the guy says to me, Archie, we want to be really clear. We would like to keep you here at the NBC family and stuff like that. What would you like to do? You want to meet with some writing? I thought that was really, really generous of you to say, because I've waited a long time to sit in a fancy restaurant with a fancy guy like you and have these conversations. But I can't believe I'm saying this, but I got to go to Asia because I'm getting more opportunity there, and I'm playing these characters that I wanted to play. So I go over there, and at the time, I was engaged, and I was like gonna set my life there. But and we got married, and then I'm looking at the news that Fresh Off the Boat got greenlit, Crazy Rich Asians got greenlit, and I was like, oh, it's true what he said. There really is, more stuff coming. And I could get more granular as to what my theory is as to why that happened, but I won't take this in that direction. But but it's a thrill to see, because in my career, in my life, I didn't think I'd ever see this happen. But still, at the end of the day, even if the market economics are in place to create an environment of this opportunity, story is good story, and that is obviously. That's not going to change. We need to have good content creators.
You've alluded to the idea that economics is part of this equation that drives the change in tastes and the drive to maybe seek out broader content, a broader slate of content creators, people who may not have had their stories told before. And I'm talking not only about people of color, but LGBTQ folks, stories that haven't necessarily been covered by the mainstream. Do you think this is actually just, some of it, some people scoff, well, it's just a moment in time. We've come out of a year where there's been a lot of talk and protests around racial equity. So this is arts organizations and studios and production houses saying, yeah, we want to tip our hat to that. Or do you see it as part of a more lasting, long-term change, a real sea change in what we're going to see in terms of our entertainment choices?
I think it's a confluence of events that's contributed to why we're here and why we're looking at the market environment that we're in. And if you look at, not to harp on this too much, but when I started my career, Asian American men in particular, Asian Americans, but Asian American men in particular were worthless. You don't represent any foreign sales value whatsoever unless you're, a martial artist or something like that. Or, I mean, but besides that, really, there really wasn't any. The stars are the ones that drive the financing of the project. But there literally was no opportunity to become a star because they weren't creating products like that. So as China back then, I don't know what their box office was, but it was probably like number, 40 or 50 in the world or something. It was completely inconsequential. Um, and so as their GDP grew, they can't, all the Western studios were clamoring to get into those theaters because in order to substantiate the budgets of these large movies, they need to have those theaters. So that the economics of that market region drove a lot of the fervor to kind of like co-produce, co-finance a lot of these big ticket items. I'm not going to say that it was necessarily spurring a creative trend, but definitely spurned an economic intention. And then with the advent, with the proliferation of K-pop and K-dramas, that further pollinated that aesthetic in the Western mainstream culture. So, like I said, it's a number of different things that started to drive the engine of change. And what always happens is they take the fabric of the story and stretch it over the economic model. Right now, because the Pacific Rim as a whole is more valuable, and not just that, but Southeast Asia as well, it cannot be ignored. Right. There's that's why. And so it's given rise to the opportunity for content creators to go in there and create things in their likeness, because that's what content creators do. They usually create things in their likeness. Right. So, and that's why we're here. And with people, with the the Asian hate and that kind of stuff that's happened, obviously a lot of things in the world, it's complicated how we got here. But at the same time, what I maintain is that is further evidence of the fact that Asians in America have really burst into the mainstream consciousness, because there was always discrimination and prejudice. We just see it now. We have campaigns constructed around it now.
Right.
How many people suffered in silence?
We're talking about it now.
Right.
It's interesting, the Sesame Street, which has been around for 52 years, this week or around Thanksgiving, just introduced their first Asian American Muppet, Korean American.
Oh, yeah.
And, that's groundbreaking. This show for children has been around for half a century. And this is the first time they're acknowledging the representation of an Asian character in their show. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, again, it's because it's the people that, America's only a few hundred years old, right? And so it was really crafted by white Europeans. And so the major industries of the country were crafted, in their likeness. And believe me, they're doing that in Asia. Their lead characters are crafted in their likeness, right? So that's kind of what, again, is the macroeconomics of that engine they originally did that. But then as the pie is sliced into more pieces, then they kind of share it, which is a thrill, because just in a practical sense, I didn't grow up seeing people in my likeness in Sesame Street, and so the funny thing is, there's this TED Talk, I forgot the name of it, but she's a writer, she's an African writer who's talking about she loves stories ever since she was a little girl. She loved stories, but she didn't realize into adulthood that when she was crafting her stories, the lead character was always, blonde hair, blue eyed guy, and the girl was a, fair skinned princess or something like that. And I understand that very much, because you become indoctrinated so much into the system, you don't even realize that you're being discriminatory against yourself, because you're being, you're crafting things in the likeness that you've seen and grown up with. So it never actually even occurred to me, So seeing a Sesame Street person is great. Now they can identify with something.
It's really empowering. And speaking from the point of trying to create new content for new consumers, for younger consumers who want to see more people who look like ourselves, what are your next projects? What's on the slate for you?
Well, most recently, this is funny. I was in Asia. I was in Taiwan for much of last year. With coronavirus and everything, it was like this little safe haven with a lot of like Taiwanese American diaspora that were over there. The reason I got offered a project to play a cowboy in this movie called Christmas at the Ranch, and I'm just delighted that the writer director Kristen has. So I asked her why, because there's no reference at all as to why this guy is Asian. He just is. So I asked, and the woman that plays my grandmother is Lindsay Wagner. As I grew up watching as the Bionic Woman, and blonde hair, blue-eyed, woman. And there's a line in the movie where she says to me, this ranch has been in our family for generations. And I'm just kind of laughing to myself. I'm like, I don't know where your family was, but I think my family's probably in Chengdu or something. The fact that Kristen was completely colorblind. So I asked her, did you grow up with an Asian best friend or something? Is this some sort of homage to that? She goes, no. Have you ever met an Asian cowboy? She goes, no. And she just did. I just thought that was kind of cool. So that's why I came back from Asia for it. I was like, I want to participate in a project when content creators are actually creating characters. Just to be characters. Obviously, the assumption is adopted, but it doesn't, you don't necessarily need to hit the nail on the head like that, because it's still really the fundamentals of the story are still, like I said, story. It's about family and about, acceptance and growth, and challenges that you endure as a family. And those things we all get, familial ties we all get.
Right. Those are universal values.
Right.
All right. I want to thank our guest, Archie Kao. Thank you, Archie, for coming on the show and sharing your experiences with us today.
Oh, thanks so much, Sasha. It was delighted to come on the show today and share some of this journey that I've been on. And I really appreciate Asian Voices giving me the opportunity to kind of help disseminate the narrative.
To learn more about Archie Kao, please visit our website, asianvoicesradio.com. And also, if you have any suggestions for future topics, we'd love to hear from you. Also, be sure to subscribe as well as follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time, I'm Sasha Fu. Thanks so much for listening. Please join us next week for another exciting and thought-provoking edition of Asian Voices Radio. Until then, take care, everyone.